I had a friend that was a genius. This guy had an IQ that was astronomical, in the 160 range. And he had diabetes, and he insulined himself to death in his 40s. Not really suicide, it was more not really taking care of himself, which is suicide, I mean, if you think about it. A couple of them drank themselves to death. Of course, there's only 12 out of it. That means 60 of us survived. About 3 people have dementia out of the 60, and about 7 people have mental illnesses of one kind or another. Really fascinating talking to those people. Anyway, so about 50 people are still functional, which is kind of fun. Kind of fun, a little bit, not that fun. Nebraska, huh? Yeah, okay.
I was down on the 3rd floor.
That's a tragedy.
That was a Tuesday class. I was like,
Oh man, today's Monday. Yeah. Okay.
Are you sure?
I'm real sure. Not only that, but Monday comes before Tuesday, which was a shock to me as well. Anyway, so most of these people are doing okay. They're doing fine. Most of them are relatively successful. Nobody has a lot of money except the doctor. Well, we had a doctor in my class, very competitive individual. That's probably why he went to medical school. Kind of an interesting guy. Anyway, kind of a fascinating group. As we're going through, as we're talking about these things, I'll probably bring up my classmates from high school more and more, since I know their stories now, some of their stories. I already told you about the guy that started communicating with me because he was upset about his wife had decided not to have sex with him anymore, and he was kind of upset. And I kind of forced him into determining how he felt about his wife, whether he wanted to stay, you know. Everybody's got a choice. So I told him to go out and find a girlfriend, and I didn't really want him to go out and find a girlfriend. What I wanted him to do was think about how strongly he felt about his wife. You know, and he did. He stayed with his wife. He's a very religious individual. Anyway, okay, so we have lots of different perspectives. We're talking about strength perspective. We're talking about resilience perspective, and of course, as far as my friend was concerned, one of his strengths was his religion. Another one of his strengths was his strong family ties, and because of that, he decided. I have a friend that's a philanderer. I guess that's a word. He's a serial seducer. Tall, handsome, well-spoken, and this guy seduces people, and he's been doing this all of his life. That's his modus operandi, is not to find not to pair bond with somebody, not to find a girlfriend, not to find a wife. He's always been looking for somebody to have sex with, and he's a nurse, so evidently he treated himself for all kinds of I don't know. Anyway, so he didn't get married until, I don't know, he's 68 years old now. He didn't get married until he was about 60 years old, but he had girlfriends, buku girlfriends. I mean, every time he visited Indiana, he came with a new girlfriend. So this guy's a serial seducer. Anyway, so he's an iconic figure in my class, and the individual I was telling you about, of course, the very first thing he talked about was this individual, was this serial seducer. It was really kind of fascinating. So I needed to force this individual to not think of this guy as positively as he did before, which was kind of interesting. And the way I did that was, of course, my friend they're both my friends. What am I talking about? The one individual whose wife didn't want to have sex with him anymore has 4 kids, and his kids are very important to him. And that's what I needed to show him. I needed to show him what his family looked like, and the fact that this individual had no kids, had no wife, didn't really care about kids, didn't really care about taking care of anybody except himself. So do you really want this guy as an iconic figure in your life? And eventually, of course, he rejected that idea, and he stayed with his wife, and I mean, everything turned out positively. And he's the guy that I was chasing around. I was trying to shake hands with him a couple years ago when I saw him, and this time he came up to me and he thanked me. So it's really kind of an interesting situation. And I fixed somebody, but it took them 2 years to decide that I actually fixed it. All right. Okay, so we've been talking about strengths, we've been talking about resilience. This is the empowerment perspective. We only have 2 more perspectives that we're going to look at. This is the empowerment perspective. It describes the process by which individuals, groups, or communities take control of their circumstances to achieve their goals. Empowerment. And that's, of course, what you're trying to do with your clients. You're trying to empower your clients to fix themselves, because you're not going to be able to fix somebody. They have to fix themselves. And that's exactly what happened with my friend Phil. Phil needed to fix himself, but he needed to look at things from a realistic point of view. He's got 4 kids. Does he really want to start acting like, some kind of a party animal jackass? Does he really want to do that? That's what I needed him to realize, that this individual was not the positive figure that we all thought he was in high school. Of course, I recognized this in high school, but then again, I'm a people watcher, and I can project what potentially might happen. I never assumed that he would never get married. He is married now. He married a woman with children, which is kind of interesting. But he married a woman with children, and none of the children are in the house, but she's taking care of a set of twins. And one of the twins has only 1 lung, because the mother was taking, she's doing something, marijuana, heroin, something. Anyway, one of the kids was only born with 1 lung. He's a nurse, so she married him, and now he gives the kid respiratory treatments, so, which is kind of interesting, that he found somebody who needs his medical expertise. Empowerment has an internal as well as an external component. We're going to talk about that right now. Internal and external. The internal component of empowerment is also called psychological empowerment. You have control over, or you try to show them that they have control over their motivations, over their cognitions, and over their personality. Now, the personality wasn't difficult. I wasn't difficult to show Phil that he had his own personality, because he does. He's a veterinarian, and he's a good veterinarian. And it's interesting to watch this guy function, because as a veterinarian, of course, he's dealing with animals, but he's also dealing with people dealing with their animals. He's dealing with people who have an emotional connection to their animals. I was listening to him talking to somebody on the phone, and it was more, well, what do you want me to do? Are you okay? Do you need me to come over and take care of this? It's somebody's pet that they need to put down. And of course, he's doing as much counseling as I've ever done with an individual, because they have this emotional attachment to their animals. This is in Indiana, of course. And it turned out to be a cow, Who's that connected to their cows? Well, I guess you can get connected to Sally or whatever. But he recognizes this. Sometimes people have an emotional connection to their animals, and you have to treat them a little bit different. Nobody likes to watch an animal be put down, unless, of course, they're butchering them for meat or something. Anyway, so his personality is fine. And of course, what we were talking about when I was talking to him about my other friend, about my serial seducer friend, what are his motivations? Does he really, what drives you? What are your motivations? And in this case, of course, he wanted his wife to show him that she had affection for him. And of course, she could do that in other ways than have sex with him. And, what are you thinking about? That's one of the things that I was talking about with Phil. Internal empowerment involves the belief that the individual will make competent decisions, solve their problems, achieve their goals, and have a significant impact on the environment. Okay, So we're trying to empower this individual to function properly in the real world. When I was in high school, I was the youngest kid in the class. I was the second youngest kid in the class. No, I was the third youngest kid in the class. I was born on October 12th. There was another guy born October 14th, another guy born October 18th. We were the three youngest individuals in the class. And females always mature faster than males. Of course, I didn't know this at the time. I hadn't taken all these psychology classes, developmental psychology classes. I didn't really understand this, but I could see this, of course. I knew that we were younger than everybody else. Really kind of fascinating. So one of the individuals I was talking to this weekend, I didn't have a lot of female friends in the class because, well, they were not only older than I was, but I was kind of backwards anyway. And one of the individuals wanted to talk about, well, why didn't anybody want to date me in high school? And it wasn't that nobody wanted to date her. She was a very attractive individual, and she was intimidating, and of course that was part of the whole thing. But she wanted to know why nobody wanted to date her. And the reality was, of course, nobody in our class is going to want to date her because she's so much more mature than they are. You know, males are about 2 years behind females until you get to the end of puberty, and then males catch females. But so all the way through high school, if you think about it, the males in your class are really not the males at the same maturity level as you are. And you probably noticed exactly the same thing, and that's what I tried to tell her. You know, I'm lecturing this individual. and she's got a mental illness, and it's just going completely over her head. You know, that kind of thing. Yeah, I was only this tall and you were that tall, so yeah, I'm going to date you. You know, I'm going to ask you to go out with me. The external component of empowerment includes the tangible knowledge, the competencies, skills, information, opportunities, and resources that allow a person to take action and actively advocate change. And those are the external components. So this is what we're looking for. How much of this do you have? You have knowledge, competencies, skills, information, opportunities, and resources to actually give the individual empowerment. If we're talking about a political group, a council, you know, how much leeway is the mayor going to give you? How much leeway is the governor going to give you? What kind of resources do you have? How can you solve these problems? Do you have the skills? Do you have the competencies? I was talking about this last time. The reality is if somebody is elected, it's tough to be elected to anything anyway, but let's say you were elected to Congress, all of a sudden you've got a bill, it's about a new reservoir over in Johnson County or something, or whatever. Well, how much knowledge do you have about hydro components, hydrodynamics? How much information do you have about this stuff anyway? How many people are engineers, civil engineers? Maybe it's a new sewer system going through. We need to build a new sewer system that will last for 100 years. What do you make it out of? You know, are you that kind of an engineer? Who has these types of competencies? And of course, as soon as you become a congressman, you need to start making these kinds of decisions, as strange as that is. Anyway, so that's exactly what we're talking about, having the knowledge to do all these things. One of my friends was a city manager. He wasn't a city planner. I thought he was a city planner. He was a city manager. So he had to know everything. He was the guy that made these decisions about how you're going to fix the sewer system, whether you can build a high-rise apartment in this place. He was an engineer, and he became a city manager, and he became a relatively famous city manager. He saved the city of Cincinnati. He built all of their riverfront. He built Riverfront, and then he tore down Riverfront and built Great American Ballpark. But he's the one that created all that. He was working in Cincinnati at the time. And of course, he was a political entity. So since he was political, he got into all kinds of interesting trouble with the other side because the other side was more traditional. They wanted to maintain this or maintain that. He condemned a building that it would have cost millions of dollars to save. And of course, everybody got all up in arms, like you could just go in and save anything. This is down by the river, and it was contaminated with black mold. It had asbestos, all not just in the ceiling, but it was all the walls were asbestos as well. What are you going to do with a building like that? Well, they had to tear it down, and when they tore it down, it cost them millions of dollars to tear it down, but it would have cost them tens of millions of dollars to renovate it. So everybody got up in arms about it. They wanted to save the building, and it was just impossible. Empowerment, like resilience, is a process as well as an outcome. New competencies learned from experience leads to new feelings of empowerment. Research shows that the more involved an individual, the stronger the feeling of empowerment. Of course, that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to get your students, your clients involved with their own health. We see this in medicine all the time. An individual comes in, especially with males. Males are the worst. An individual will come in and they'll have a select problem, and so they come in and you look at them and you go, you know, that's not your only problem. As a matter of fact, that's not your most severe problem. You have this, and this as a problem as well. You've got high blood pressure. Your glucose is getting too high. You're developing. You're pre-diabetic. We need to start thinking about reducing your weight, controlling your cholesterol level. We need to start doing these things. Of course, he came in for a hangnail, and once you looked at him and looked him over, you realized he had all these other problems. So the problem is that he's not really invested in all these other problems that he has. This hurts him right now. The diabetes will hurt him in the future, but it's not bothering him right now. The cholesterol, of course, if we change his cholesterol, he's going to have to stop eating fried foods, which he doesn't want to do since that's his diet. So they're not invested in all these problems that they have, and unless you can get them to invest in these problems, you can give them all the pills that you want to lower their cholesterol level, but that means they have to take them. So you have to get them to be able to, or you have to be able to get them to take them. And of course that has to do with them becoming involved in their own problems. And of course sometimes that happens. It was kind of interesting, my brother, I told you about my brother, Vietnam vet, got a lot of interesting problems. Most of those problems are gone. I was really surprised. He talked to me the whole time. I'd gone to his house and stayed there for 2 or 3 days, and he wouldn't say anything to me. But this time he just jabbered like a crazy man. It was wonderful. The difference? What's the difference? What's the difference in my brother's life? Why in the world has my brother? What fixed my brother? Was it me? Hell no, it didn't have anything to do with it. I haven't talked to him in a year and a half. So what fixed my brother? What fixed my brother was that my niece has triplets, and they go to a school. He has to pick them up in the afternoon because she doesn't get off work until 5. They get out of school at 3:30, so he goes and picks them up. So he's responsible for these girls for an hour and a half. And while I was there, he buys them presents. While I was there, UPS stopped, and they all bought something out of the LL Bean catalog. So all their LL Bean stuff came over the holiday, or over the weekend, or on Friday actually. It's really kind of neat. So he buys them stuff, and he just loves them to death. And it's given him a new lease on life, as confusing as that is, or not confusing at all. Gives him a reason to be. And he wants to live. So I asked, this kid hasn't been to the doctor since, he was wounded in Vietnam. This guy, we can't get him to go to a doctor. But he's on Medicare now, and he's been to the doctor, and his cholesterol's fine, and his sugar's fine, everything's okay. He's a little bit paunchy, but that's, neither here nor there. He walks all the time, takes care of, he's taking care of himself. He's got these triplets to take care of, which they're not really triplets. They were just born, all three of them were born at the same time. They don't look alike. They're fraternal triplets, I guess. One of them is tall, and my daughter's only 4'11". She's not very tall, and so she's the iconic figure that they have to reach. The tall one, she's only in the 5th grade. She's already 4'9", and she wears a size 10 shoe. Is that big? She wears an adult woman's size 10 shoe. And,
Sounds like giantism in there somewhere.
she's got it. I'm assuming she took after me. I've got size 12 feet, and I'm only 5'6", so I don't know. Maybe she took after me. The empowerment perspective allows clients to develop a sense of power and competency as they experience using their skills and knowledge in new and challenging ways. And of course, that is what we need to get them to do. Need to get them to start thinking of themselves as an innovative individual who can do it. All empowerment means is convincing them that they have the power to do it. That's it. That's all empowerment means. And so that's what you're trying to do with your client. Because the reality is you can give them the right information all day long, but unless they will become responsible for themselves, they haven't bought into it yet. So you need to empower them. You need to get them to do it, to be able to do it. The empowerment perspective helps people discover their strengths, identify their goals, and develop a plan to reach their goals, allowing clients to accept responsibility for change and experience a greater sense of empowerment. Okay, so the difference between this and strength and resilience is that this has a plan, and the plan has to do with you identifying their strengths, them accepting those strengths, and then they come up with a plan with goals to achieve. And then, of course, and that forces them to take responsibility, which is exactly what I was trying to do with Phil. I was trying to get him to take responsibility for himself, for his family. You know, fantasizing about having, going to the strip joint and having sex with all the strange people that live there is one thing, but he needed to take responsibility for his own family and for his own life. And that's why I suggested to him that he find a girlfriend. He needed to work through that whole process. And he did. He took responsibility. I figured he would. He's a really religious individual. I didn't figure he was going to wander off the reservation. Find himself a hot tamale too. Yes.
So what was his expression when you told him that? People find it.
Oh, it was on Facebook, so I have no idea what his expression was. But he only communicated with me one more time before he unfriended me, I guess. And this is a long time ago. We haven't really interacted since then. But finally, and that was like 10 years ago or so. So. Yeah, he acknowledged the fact that was the turning point in his relationship. That he was maintaining all these strange fantasies that he needed to just discard, and that was a turning point. And of course, things have turned around. His wife's had sex with him since then, on his birthday or something. Which doesn't sound important. I know it doesn't sound important, but the reality is, of course, it just shows love, and that's really what he wanted. He needed her to come up with a way that she showed him affection, that beyond sex. But then once he stopped thinking about his friend that was having sex with all different kinds of people, and thinking of placing himself, fantasizing about himself being that individual, it was a lot easier for him. So it was an evolutionary process. But eventually, of course, he came up with the right decision. Okay, that's the empowerment perspective. As you can see, one of the things that we need to do, and you can use all of these perspectives. You can use strengths, you can use resilience, you can use empowerment. You're always trying to empower. You're always trying to empower your clients. But we need to talk about the dual perspective, because this is really true as far as this population is concerned, as far as natives are concerned. The dual perspective is very important. The dual perspective is very important to people who are living in a society that's dominated by somebody else. Because these individuals have to live in two different worlds. We're going to talk about those worlds right now. The dual perspective views an individual as interacting and adapting to two surrounding systems or environments. You have a nurturing environment and you have a sustaining environment. Your nurturing environment are the people around you. It's your family, it's your extended family, it's your friends. These are the individuals that nurture you. Kind of interesting, when I first came here, this is what I was looking for. I was seeking a nurturing environment. When I first got here, my wife wasn't here yet. And neither were any of my pets. Was that true? I didn't have any pets. Did I have any pets? I didn't bring any pets. I didn't bring any pets the first time. I drove my little car. And then my wife came, I don't know, about a month later, maybe a month and a half later. Wait a minute, she came in October because she had to harvest the apples. And then it turned out the apples had been torn from. So we couldn't get any cider out of it. We're still looking, the apples are okay. They don't have worms yet, so we're okay. She's going to harvest them probably in a couple of weeks. So we'll see what happens. Anyway, this is what I was looking for when I got here. I was hoping to find a nurturing environment. And it was tough. It's really tough. The only nurturing environment I probably, if you had me that first semester, I was telling my students how much I appreciated all the positive feedback I was getting, because that was the only nurturing environment I had. I wasn't getting anything from the administration. My department was kind of competitive, which is I'm not used to, because I don't compete. Why would I compete with my colleagues, right? It's not like I'm going to take over because, I'm trying to take over the department or whatever. But I'm not that kind of a guy. I just want to teach. So you guys were really important to me. The electricity went off. Is that what happened? Okay. All right.
Only in here because the hall lights are on.
Is it just in here? No. Is it still charging? Okay. So this thing burned up? No, it didn't.
The lights are still on.
Okay, the electricity has come back on. Okay, so you guys were my nurturing environment. I mean, I didn't have my wife, my kids are wherever my kids are. My son, real traumatic weekend, because my son lives in Fort Myers, and as you know, if you even care about the hurricane that was about to blast into Florida, Fort Myers was right in the eye. And of course it did get hit, and I don't know what happened to it. But we were trying to get him out of Florida. He was driving out of Florida. They ran out of gas. There was no place to stay. These guys, they were tough. It was a tough situation. But they made it over to Mobile. Everything's fine. It's downgraded to a tropical storm now, so everybody's happy. But I was trying to get my son out of Florida. And of course he was calling on the phone. He's got the 3 cats, and they were trying to escape across. They were trying to escape west. Well, if you live down in Fort Myers, I don't know if it's a peninsula, so you have to go north. You have to go north about 300 miles, and then catch an interstate going west over there. And that's what they did. They stayed one night in Orlando, and then they caught the Interstate 10, I guess, it goes across to Mobile, and they're okay. Everything's fine. He's a teacher, so the question was, what's going to happen today? Does he have to go to work today? It turns out that his school is an evacuation center. So they didn't have school today, tomorrow, or Wednesday. They canceled school for those 3 days. we'll see what happens on Thursday and Friday. I don't know. He may have to come back. But right now, he's safe and sound in Mobile, Alabama. So the nurturing environment, this is what I was seeking. This is what I tried to find. And I found a couple individuals in the administration that were military people. Military, I don't know. There's something wrong with military people. We're kind of all brothers in this stupidity, I guess. Yeah, exactly. So, and this was my nurturing environment for the first 2 or 3 months that I was here. And of course, I love my students. I tell you guys that all the time. And that was my nurturing environment. And I needed that. I needed to feel like I was wanted and needed, and you guys gave me that. The sustaining environment consists of the people encountered in the wider community and the broader society. Not the most welcoming community in the world, this community. It's kind of a closed community. And of course, I don't belong here, and I understand that. I agree with it, I don't belong here. So the sustaining environment is a lot different than the nurturing environment. While most European Americans experience nurturing and sustaining environments as fitting together, other ethnic and racial groups experience a poor fit between them. And of course, this is part of the problem that you have if you leave the reservation. Potentially, this is part of the problem that you have if you leave the reservation. If you're here, your friends are here. Your family's here. There's always somebody that you can call on the phone. If you go out there, now all of a sudden you have to find your own nurturing environment. You have to create your own nurturing environment. And you can imagine that if you are, if you're a minority and you're trying to survive in the world, in a very competitive world full of crazy, greedy white people, then it may not be as easy as you think it is. You may think that you're going to make a lot more money and that's what you're looking for, but the reality may be it's tough out there. It's real tough out there, and those people aren't very nice. But the reality is, people aren't very nice. You have to find people. You have to find your own nurturing environment. But what if you look different than everybody else? Can you find a nurturing environment if you look different than everybody else? We do. We do.
But it's often difficult.
It is difficult. It's
And it's not just a momentary thing. It continues on.
right. And sometimes you think that you found somebody that is your friend and that you can talk to, and then all of a sudden, they tell the world. Kind of interesting. A friend of mine did something he potentially shouldn't have done, and he assumed that I told everybody about it. Well, I didn't tell anybody. Felt like I could keep a secret very well, but I thought this was important enough that I needed to keep that as a secret. But he assumed I had told everybody. I didn't tell anybody. But that was his assumption. Who can you trust? Can you trust anybody? That was the question. And the answer is, yeah, he can trust me. There's something wrong with me. I don't have any friends, so I don't have anybody to talk to. He's like my only friend. I told him over and over again what he had done. Individuals in non-dominant groups constantly evaluate disappointments in life to determine whether they are based on one's qualifications or on racism from the dominant culture. So if something happens to you, did something not happen to you because of who you are? If I don't get a raise this year, is it because I'm a white guy? Is that why they didn't give me a raise? Do they treat me differently than they treat everybody, than they treat the native people that work here? This is something that I've heard from other individuals who are not Dene, that they aren't treated very well here because they are a different group. They're from a different tribe. I have a friend that comes into my office and complains that he's half Apache. And so he can't even get his family to give him any wood, it's that kind of, Nobody will give me hay, he says. Well, how am I going to feed my horses? Well, I don't have any hay.
Get a grazing permit.
That's what his family tells him. But he can't get a grazing permit. He's, when he breeds his sheep, he's always at the back of the list. Exactly sure. He thinks it's because he's half Apache, but he's not really half Apache. He's only a quarter Apache. It's his grandmother that was the Apache. So he's only a quarter Apache. He's not half. I didn't try to explain that to him. He has his own rationale for everything. But he thinks he's being picked on because he's Apache. Is that a possibility? He thinks people are mean to him because he's part Apache. Is that possible?
Maybe.
Nothing's impossible here. Haven't you discovered that?
Well, of course I've discovered that. And maybe he's right. Maybe he's a jackass and nobody likes him, so they put him at the back of the list. I don't know. I think he seems to be a good guy to me, but that's me, I guess. Anyway, okay. So is it racism or is it because there's something wrong with you? And of course, in his case, is it because he's a jerk or is it because he's part Apache and everybody knows that? Minority members must develop a dual perspective, equating disappointments with the hostility of the broader society. The problem is, of course, you don't know which one it is. You can assume that it's, I'm okay, and they're just picking on me. And a lot of people, that chip will get on their shoulder and they can't get rid of it. They will not get rid of it. They don't recognize the fact that potentially they're not the number one person. Anyway, minority members must constantly shift between home culture and the dominant culture to choose acceptable behavior in each situation. If you're an urban individual and you live in a relatively negative neighborhood, then potentially the words that you use while you're talking to the people in your neighborhood are different from the words that you use when you go to school. And this is something that my niece was talking to me about. She used to work in a black high school in Chicago. And she was saying, well, sometimes these individuals will just drop the F-bomb. I mean, it's like every third word. But of course, out on the street, if they didn't drop the F-bomb, then people would pick on them. People would may take advantage of them. And in this case, of course, taking advantage of somebody would be sexual assault, potentially, murder. I mean, there are all kinds of interesting things that are happening out there. And sometimes in order to keep people from attacking you, you have to swear at them. And this works in that environment. Of course, that's not going to work in high school. When you're talking to your teacher, you don't want to do that. But sometimes, you've got to figure out where you are. I know where I am right now. I'm not going to talk like I did when I was in the military. It wasn't so much me, it was the people coming into the emergency room. They were the ones, because they were hurt and they were used to talking like that. And that's fine, They needed to feel comfortable in their environment. They needed to feel comfortable in their environment. So sometimes you have a home culture perspective and you have a dominant culture perspective, and sometimes you have to live in both worlds. And you have to go between one and the other. If you speak Dene, and I guess everybody has to speak Dene in order to graduate from here, of course, sometimes you speak your language and sometimes you don't. To me, you can speak to me in Dene, but I probably won't understand most of it. Sometimes I'll understand some of it. And we see this in the black community. We see this with individuals on television. We can see that sometimes they talk like white people and sometimes they talk like black people. And it's kind of funny. Or not. Sometimes they use it as humor. Eddie Murphy's really good at that. Flip-flopping between one and the other. Barack Obama. When he was talking to a black crowd, he didn't talk the same way, and it pissed people off. It pissed white supremacists off a lot. They hated that guy. They wanted him, I don't want to say they wanted him dead. They didn't like him at all. I told you about the guy that shot the gun. Well, that's in another class, I'm sorry. This guy discharged a weapon at Charlottesville into a crowd of anti-supremacist protesters. And it turns out that this guy was a grand wizard of the Ku Klux Klan in Baltimore, and that and he said at one point that he didn't care what Obama said or what Obama did, he was against it, no matter what it was. And that was his mission in life, was to make sure that nothing that Obama said or did became law. And of course, that's kind of what is happening now with the political climate in Washington. We'll see if that evens itself out somehow, and that maybe Donald Trump will just stop attacking Obama. Maybe he's doing that for his base. I don't know. Okay, so the dual perspective is very real. So this is one of the things that you need to think about when you talk to somebody. Who are you and where are you as far as this is concerned? How strongly, and this is something we talked about before, how strongly do you identify with your culture? How strongly do you not identify with the dominant culture? This is really important. Because from this piece of information, you know how to look at this individual and determine what it is that you need to do to help them. If they're not traditional at all, telling them that they need a healing ceremony is not going to do very much good. As a matter of fact, it may offend them if they're, some kind of evangelical Christian or something. They may be offended. And this happened up north. The lady she was the first female tribal chairman, kind of interesting. But she spelled her last name with a small letter. Now there's a bunch of people on the reservation with the same last name, but she spelled it with a small letter. And the reason she spelled it with a small letter was because she was an evangelical Christian, and she felt that if she capitalized the first letter of her last name, it was supporting, I don't know, heathenism or something, I don't know. It's really kind of bizarre. And I didn't really understand this until, eventually somebody explained it to me. Really weird. I mean, so you got to understand who these people are. You've got to learn who they are in order to be able to help them, because you don't want to give them information or try to guide them in a direction that is not really going to help them. The dual perspective allows the practitioner to understand the structural barriers that those in the other group experience. The reality is it's going to be difficult for you if you go and start counseling in Denver and your first client is African American, or your first client is Muslim, or your first client is Hispanic. Where are they coming from? What is their perspective? How much do they adhere to the dominant culture? Are they angry because of the dominant culture? A lot of people are. Some people are very pissed off that the dominant culture doesn't nurture them, doesn't take care of them. This perspective makes the practitioner aware of the day-to-day challenges minority clients face. Now you have to remember that this book was written, this lecture was written, not for you guys, it's written for white people. And they really need to understand that not everybody acts just like you guys do, like they do, that's what I'm saying. I grew up in rural Indiana, and of course all the people that I was interacting with this weekend were from rural Indiana. Some of these guys had never left Daleville, Indiana. As horrible as that sounds, well, they went to Anderson, but it's right next door. It's only it's right, it abuts Daleville, so yeah, of course. And they know Chesterfield, and they know Muncie, but they don't know they don't know the rest of Indiana. They don't know anything except where they are. And these are the people that they wrote this book for. They wrote this book for people that have lived in the same place all their lives. Okay. And don't recognize the fact that there are minority cultures. They think minority cultures want to be just like them. That is the misperception that these people have. They believe in the melting pot, that everybody wants to be just like them. They are the iconic figure. Everybody wants to own a house in Daleville and move to Anderson or whatever. and stay there the rest of their life. My brother married a woman from Anderson. My brother's, well, he's from Daleville, but he married a woman from Anderson. He was in the military. She married him when he was he's going overseas. Well, he's going to training actually at the Presidio in California. She hated it. She hated it. And then his first assignment was in Panama. She hated it. She couldn't stand it. So when he came back, he got a job. She induced him. He wanted to stay in the military. He was working intelligence, which is a misnomer, of course, military intelligence. He wanted to stay in. He was having a good time. They tried to get him to go to Washington, D.C. She hated it. She wanted to go back to Anderson. So he got a job right outside of Anderson as a farmer. She hated it. She couldn't stand it because he was out in the field all the time. If it rained, he had to go out and, dig out the drainage ditch at 2 o'clock in the morning. She hated it. She couldn't stand it. She didn't know where he was. One time she called the cops on him. She called the police because he was out opening up a drainage ditch so that his field didn't flood. And all of a sudden he hears the police come screaming down the road with all lights flashing. Well, she had called the police because she didn't know where he was. She didn't call the police on him. She called the police because of him. And of course, what do you do next? Well, you get a job so that you don't have to be away from your wife for more than 8 hours a day. So that's what he did. And guess where they live right now? They live in Anderson, of course. Of course, she has to live in Anderson. It's the only place in the world. You didn't know that, did you? Anderson's the only place in the world to live. It's an ugly place. Oh my God. They closed all the factories. It's a nasty, nasty place. But at least she lives in Anderson because she's always lived there. It's the only place in the world that you can possibly live. Anyway, as far as she's concerned, it's the only place that she can live. And that's the end of chapter 2. So I'm only a week behind. That's not too bad. But luckily, chapter 3 is really short. Chapter 3 is about ethics. As counselors, we have to understand values, ethics, and legal obligations that you have. Why do I have the dancing couple here? Well, you'll see it in a minute. I thought it was kind of cool. Anyway, chapter 3 is different. I think this guy's so cool. McLovin. Values are preferred, conceptions of people preferred, outcomes for people preferred, ways of dealing with people. We all have these things. We all have our own values, how to deal with people. Talking to my former high school, well, we're not in high school anymore. Talking to individuals, one of the interesting things I found is that some people focused on the bad things that happened to them in life, and some people focused on the positive things that happened to them in life. Really kind of interesting trying to have a conversation with somebody who bad things have happened to, because that's all they focus on, is the bad things. I talked to an individual, all he kept talking about was being wounded in Vietnam, being wounded in Vietnam. Well, buddy, that was 45 years ago, wasn't it? No. 47, 48 years ago. You were wounded in Vietnam 48 years ago. Why are you still talking about it? Because it talks about negative things. Then I lost my wife. I lost my job because they closed the factory. All of this negative stuff. I'm thinking, really? Did anything positive happen to you? Yes, he got married to this lady and then he had 3 kids, but he didn't talk about any of the positive stuff. He only talked about the negative stuff. He has 2 good kids and 1 black sheep. That's usually the way it is in a family. If you have 1 kid that you worry about. So did he talk about his 2 good kids? No, he talked about his 1 black sheep all the time. Anyway, we all have values, and some people have more positive values than others. It's the way that you deal with people. Personal values influence your view of the world, your personal and professional philosophies and choices, and your view of how people change. Okay. And his view of how people change is fairly negative. This guy, he hates everybody. He hates everybody because everybody's against him. I didn't realize that his name was up on some kind of a board someplace that tells everybody that you have to hate this guy, but according to him, everybody hates him. So he gets on Facebook, and I friended him at one point, and he unfriended me because he would tell me about all this horrible stuff, and then I'd say, well, it's not so bad, and it did piss him off because he was trying to, he trolls people. He's a troll. I don't know what that means. He's a jackass. But, I tried to have a conversation with him and accentuate the positive, but it didn't work. No. He talked about his black sheep child. He's got, one of his kids is a lawyer, so why not talk about the lawyer? Why are you talking about the drug addict, the prostitute drug addict, an individual that seems to get pregnant every time she smokes marijuana? Why in the world talk about that kid? Mainly because he has to take care of the children. Professional values often include principles of respect, self-determination, social justice, and professional integrity. And of course, we're specifically talking about counselors. That's why social justice is so important. Areas where personal values may conflict with professional values include religion. And we talked about this last time. If you remember, someone was saying that they went to see a counselor and she tried to convert them to her religion, which is something that you shouldn't do. I mean, if your religion is that important to you, then you need to find a different job. If your religion is that important to you, then you need to not do this, okay? Because you need to deal with the people, you need to accept them as they are. And that's not always the easiest thing in the world. Especially if you're a very strict one thing or another. You need to be really, really careful. I have interacted with individuals that the only reason they wanted to talk to me was because they wanted to convert me to their religion. And once they realized he's a lost cause, I ceased to exist for them. My son used to be he wanted to be an actor in Hollywood. So sometimes he would go to Hollywood parties. And one time he met, who's the guy? John Travolta, Scientology. Fascinating guy. And he said, when John Travolta talks to you, he makes eye contact. There's nobody else in the world when he makes eye contact with you. And then he starts proselytizing. He starts preaching Scientology. And if you don't go along with what he says, all of a sudden, it's like a light switch goes off. You cease to exist. And then he goes to the next guy. He goes to important people, of course, he has to adhere to because these individuals are the ones that make his movies or ask him if he wants to star in their movies. The wealthy people, they've already got to step up on you. But if you're one of those people he's trying to convert to Scientology, you're either alive or dead. As sad as that is. And some religions see individuals that aren't of their religion as subhuman. Unfortunately. Okay. I'm sorry, I don't mean to talk about religion all the time, but it's a really important thing, if you can imagine it. The reality is, and I hate to tell you this, and this may change your mind as to what your major is, but there's an awful lot of people who are psychologists that have no religion. The figure, when I first started, was like 80%. It's closer to 60% now, but there's a lot of psychologists that don't adhere to one religion or another. And it's hard. It's really hard to do that if you're counseling people, because...
Is there a basis for that it occurs more often than not?
It's easier to accept people if you don't have the idea that they're wrong. Some religions teach you, especially evangelical religions, teach you that your way is right and everybody else's way is wrong. That's why there's a Baptist church and a Methodist church and an Episcopal church. They all are the right choices. They're all the right answers. But that means that the rest of them are the wrong answers. Does that make sense? And some of them are a little bit more staunch about that than others. And I won't give you tell you, I had an aunt that was an evangelist. And her religion was the correct religion, the only religion.
I grew up in Pentecostal and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff,
Yeah,
so.
exactly.
I learned as I've gone through my years that every religion the religion that you choose is right for you. It
Yeah,
might
well,
not be
that's-
right for the next person, but it's right for you
Exactly.
personally.
If you have that philosophy, then you're okay. Then you're going to be fine. But there are people that don't. There are people that will try to proselytize because their way is the only way. Not the right way, it's the only way. Okay. Health. I was talking about the guy that came in for a hangnail, and of course he's overweight, he's pre-diabetic, and he's precancerous. He's got a precancerous growth on his head. He doesn't want to deal with any of that. He just wants to deal with his hangnail. But of course, you can preach as far as health is concerned as well. Marriage and family. How do they feel about marriage and family? And of course, when I was talking to Phil, that's what I was trying to get him to recognize. I needed him to think about how he felt about marriage and family, how he felt about his wife, how he felt about his family. He needed to do that, and that's why I told him to go out and find a girlfriend, because it forced him to think about how important his wife was to him and how important his family was. Education. Some people don't care about education. To some people, it's not important. My sister-in-law married a guy that graduated from high school, went into the military, realized he was so much smarter than everybody else, so much smarter than all those people with college degrees. So he became very negative about education. He didn't believe in education because he was able to do it without any formal education. My own grandfather. My dad wanted to go to high school, and my grandfather said no. I only went through the 3rd grade, and look at me, I'm brilliant. He actually invented the backhoe, which is kind of interesting. Which is kind of fascinating, but he was that kind of a guy. He was an innovative thinker. Anyway, but he didn't believe in education. So when my dad wanted to go to high school, he had graduated from the 8th grade. When he wanted to go to high school, my grandfather said no. And he said, if you want to go to high school, you're going to have to earn your room and board. So my dad got a job after school and on the weekends working at a grocery store, and that's how he was able to finance his high school career, because his father wouldn't support him as far as that was concerned. He had to rent his room in the house. Unfortunately, while my dad was going to high school, the Depression hit, and he didn't make enough money to pay his room and board. So what happened next? So the old man wanted him to drop out of high school, and my dad didn't want to. He wanted to continue to go to high school. So his brother supplemented his income. And so his brother helped him stay in high school. And he was the only person in his family. There were 6 kids. He was the only one that graduated from high school. My dad. So education was really important to my father. So one of the things that he did when he started having children, and there were, I have 5 brothers and sisters, there are 6 of us, he started accumulating a pot of college money, just in case. And of course, most of us got scholarships, so he didn't need to dip into that pot very deeply. Anyway, education was very important to him. Not important to his father, as confusing as that is. The role of the government, and of course this is a huge conflict right now because the Trump supporters seem to be anti-government, which is kind of curious because they won the election, and now we've got an anti-government administration, which is just fascinating if you think about it. Birth and death, and of course there is a taboo about talking about death on the reservation with this group. When I was up north, of course, they held, when somebody died, they held wakes, and everybody took a week off. It was one of those kind of deals. So, you know, funerals were huge up on that reservation, but here, you guys don't really, we don't talk about that nearly as much. Births were celebrated as well. It was a huge, big deal. It was a big deal up there. And so they would have a big party after somebody was born. And of course, how important is honesty? Really, honesty? Think about it. All those people out there that lie. We're all of a sudden we're talking about Russia and whether, you know, the Trump election group, all of this committee, did they collude with the Russians? This is really important stuff. Honesty. One of the individuals in his administration, who was in his administration for like 2 weeks, was a former general, Army general, 4 stars. This guy had 4 stars. How honest is this guy? That's a real serious, yeah, I know, this is a really serious question. You assume that military people, you have one focus, you could be myopic, but honesty is one of those things. So you assume that this guy, my assumption was that Michael Flynn is going to come out and he's actually going to tell us whether, but it hasn't happened yet. I don't know what's going to happen. Anyway, honesty. Really? Well, you've got some people that have no ethics. They'll just rip you off. There's no honesty there. When I was going to, when I was going to high school, I had a good friend. I actually spent nights at his house. I had a good friend that he had 2 sisters, and when I was a sophomore in high school, we went on a trip to Purdue. We're on one side of the state, Purdue's over here. So it was a long bus trip. It was about a 2 or 3 hour bus trip. And during the bus trip, we played cards. Well, I've been playing cards all my life, canasta. We played canasta and euchre. So we're playing cards on the bus, and his sister, my friend's sister, cheated in the card game. And I'm thinking, why would you cheat in a card game? You don't get anything for it. Why in the world would you cheat? And it turned out that she made up this rule that if they said that you couldn't cheat, then you could cheat. So there was no rule against cheating. So she did. Guess what she does today? Guess who this lady is today? Her brother's a doctor. Her sister is a nurse practitioner. Well, it's a brilliant family. So what does the cheater do? The girl that taught me how to cheat, or taught me that cheating was okay. What does she do for a living? Any guesses?
Either a politician or a psychologist.
No, she's not a psychologist.
A gambler. A lawyer?
She's a lawyer. She's a lawyer. She's a lawyer, and she's a damn good one, but has no ethics. Well, obviously, I mean, she's going to cheat in card games. She's going to cheat in life, and she's not married. It's kind of interesting. You know, the rest of the family's married. They've got kids. I don't know. I find that really fascinating. Anyway, honesty. So, you know, where do you come down on honesty? How important is this? Is it okay to be a criminal? Is it okay to drive faster than the speed limit? My brother drives me crazy. He doesn't speed. He goes, if the speed limit's 55, he goes 55. It's like an old person.
How would anybody ever get to school if they go less than 80?
I'm sorry?
How would anyone ever get to school on time if they go less than 80 miles an hour?
Start earlier? Okay. Why am I talking about this? My brother only goes 55 miles an hour. I see, now I've lost my train of thought. I apologize. Okay. So honesty is really important. Ethics are really important. Ethical codes provide a brief explanation of what can be expected in the interactions between professionals and clients, as well as between professionals and other professionals. There's a reason why I can't tell time. I tell you guys I can't tell time. What if you turn in something late? Well, some professors would dock you for that. They wouldn't accept that. But I don't. I accept everything. Why? Well, sometimes I grade late. That's why I allow you to turn things in late. I should get all my grading done like the day after you turn it in, right? Or that week. Well, I'm a whole week behind right now, so, because I was gone this weekend. So because, I mean, and that seems like good ethics to me. I'm not trying to teach you how to manage your, I'm not trying to teach you how to manage your time. Let Christine teach you that, I don't care. You've got a lot of stuff to do. I almost said you got a lot of shit to do. You got a lot of stuff to do, and you got a lot of stuff for me to do. And sometimes shit happens, right? I mean, we know that happens. Sometimes you got to go someplace. Sometimes you couldn't do your homework over the weekend. Maybe for a couple of weeks you've got a sick child at home, you know. These kinds of things happen. And I recognize that. So ethically, I don't think, as long, if I can't keep a schedule, then why should I expect you to keep a schedule? Anyway, that's the way I think. But there are professors that, oh wow, I guess OJ's kind of a hard ass.
Mhm.
And I know Christine is.
He's a radical terrorist is what he is.
I don't know, none of my business. I teach the way I teach, he teaches the way that he teaches. I understand that things happen, so, you know, it's okay with me. If you don't want to do anything until the end of the semester, that just means I'm going to have to work my ass off to grade your stuff. But that's okay, because sometimes I put things off as well. Anyway, that's my ethics. That's my professional ethics. And of course, I may come across some obsessive compulsive strange person that wants me to do things the way that they do things. They want my syllabus to look just like theirs. They want everything the same. They want me to clean off my desk. And of course, that ain't going to happen either. But there are people that keep a clean desk, and as far as I'm concerned, that's incorrect. This is the way my desk looks. Anyway, professional ethics. They keep their desk clean. I had a friend that he was a jerk, but his desk was always clean. And well, the guy that just quit, if you gave him something to do, he did it right away. That was his first priority. It was whatever you told him to do. So we always got things done right away. The problem was he didn't get them done correctly. Then he had to redo them, and of course he turned it in after everybody else did because he didn't do it right the first time. But that's not important. As far as he was concerned, getting it done first was the most important thing. As confusing as that is. We all have our own professional ethics. Ethical codes contain statements about what the professionals must and must not do. And so we all have our own ethical codes. The American Association of Marriage and Family Therapy, if you want to look at their ethical codes, there's the website. The American Counseling Association has their own codes. They're all very similar. The American Psychiatric Nurses Association has their own code. Of course, the American Psychological Association has their own code, the APA. APA is huge. It might not be a bad idea to join APA. As a student, you can join APA for a cut rate. It's like $35 a year. Me, because I'm an old man, and because I have a PhD, they charge me like $235 to join APA.
That's psychological?
American Psychological Association. Yeah, these are on the, well, I've got it on the slide. I'm not done yet. There's more. The American Addiction Professions has their own code of ethics. International Association of Marriage and Family Counselors has their own website. National Association of Social Workers, if you become a social worker. National Organization of Human Services. Oh, I thought somebody was talking to. I flew in an airplane yesterday, so my ears are ringing right now. Professional, and because I did stuff to myself when I was in the military. I didn't stick things in my ears. Explosions, I was around explosions. Lots of loud noises. Helicopters, oh jeez. I could still feel the blades beating over my head. Professional competence includes practicing within the scope of competence based on education, training, professional credentials, and professional experience. And one of the things that you're going to have to do if you become a counselor, potentially you're going to have to join one of these organizations or all of them. Sarah and I are not a member of the same organization. She's a member of the American Psychological Scientific Research Association or something. And she's a member of the ASA and I'm a member of the APA. I'm a member of the American Psychological Association. So if you become a counselor, potentially whatever field of counseling you go into, of course, you'll become one of these individuals. And you'll have to adhere by their code of ethics. But like I said, they're all primarily the same. One of the most important aspects of professional competence requiring professional self-awareness is cultural competence. I talk about this all the time, mainly because my culture isn't the same as your culture. So this is very important. When you start counseling an individual, you're going to have to find out who they are. Like my friend who's 1/4 Apache. Is that important? Well, he thinks it's important because he thinks people pick on him because he's not 100% Dene. But that's his idea. I don't know. I don't know if that's true or not. Cultural competence, I was talking to Marius. Marius, I don't know if you know this, but Marius lives down in Snowflake. And Snowflake is actually south of one of the Apache reservations. So it's not really on the Navajo reservation. So all of his friends, all the people that he interacts with, are either Mormon or Apache, which is kind of interesting. Culture. So he needs to understand culture, and of course, while he was going to high school, the Mormon religion was very strong in his high school. So this was something he needed to understand the Mormon culture. I lived around Mormons from time to time, and living around Mormons is not the same as living around Episcopalians or living around Seventh-day Adventists or whatever. Seventh-day Adventists go to church on Saturday. How about that? Jehovah's Witnesses have Bible study on Thursday night. I don't know what that's all about. What is it about Thursday? I don't know. Anyway. Okay, so culture is important, and you need to be competent. You have to understand these individuals. You don't want to say, well, why don't you come Wednesday night? They're Pentecostal. Well, Pentecostals almost always have Bible study on Wednesday night. So you can't do anything on Wednesday night. Don't suggest that they go someplace on Wednesday night because they're going to be a Bible study.
Unless you're Mormon, and that's activity night for our youth.
There you go, activity night for the youth. So you have to schedule. You can't schedule anything on Wednesday night.
No, your kids won't let you.
I used to coach soccer in Nebraska, and I couldn't schedule practice for Wednesday night. I had to have practice either on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, or not at all. I couldn't. Wednesday was taboo, and it was because there were some kids that had to go to Bible study or youth something or other. Cultural competence is defined as the application of cultural knowledge about individuals and groups of people to the standards, policies, attitudes, and practices of the helping process to result in better outcomes. And one of the other things that you need to think about is that if this person is military, and they were in the military recently, that is a culture unto itself. But it's a relatively positive culture. It's a culture that doesn't exclude people, and it never excludes anybody. It's very inclusive. So it's a really positive culture. A lot of cultures reject this group or that group. Baptists reject Methodists, that kind of thing. Lutherans reject everybody that's not Lutheran, that kind of thing. Okay. Confidentiality is vital. Oh, it's time to stop. Why don't we stop right here? Confidentiality. Sorry, we'll just stop right here. I don't want to go over because I have to teach something else in just a second. All right.